Thank you guys for joining me. I want to actually start by quickly, if you guys wouldn't mind, doing a quick introduction, talking and letting us know a little bit about your organization as well as how you guys play in the smart or future building space. So,
sure. My name is Naser. I'm general manager.
Actually, sorry, if you guys could speak into the microphone, you guys are being recorded and streamed, so want to make sure that your voices get through clearly.
Okay. My name is Naser. I'm general manager of IoT and heterogeneous network in the 5G infrastructure division at Intel. My background, I was a senior VP GM of small cell deployment at Mindspeed, and we got acquired by Intel 3 years ago. My background in connectivity, be it wireless or wireline, and the role that we play, and we provide infrastructure for IoT and the connectivity for IoT and 5G.
My name is Ronny Haraldsvik. I'm with Coda Cloud, and it's a company that is providing Wi-Fi and IT as a service. And we're looking at the Wi-Fi platform as frankly, an ability to facilitate also close connectivity, low power Bluetooth, and frankly becoming a virtual IoT gateway, which is also the same thing for small cells, which is actually the market where I come from and where Sarah and I know each other from, also from the Mindspeed days. And we've seen that the connectivity here between small cells, Wi-Fi, and also in-building systems, being the conduit, for IoT connectivity into the enterprise as well as buildings.
Jim?
Excuse me, I'm Jim Sinopoli with Smart Buildings. We're engineers. We don't provide any product. We're consulting engineers. I've been in the industry, even though my degree is an aeronautical engineer. I got into buildings early and created a company, and we do technology for smart buildings. Actually have created certifications for smart buildings. Had the opportunity to work on some very large clients, have worked in the Middle East, and Ecuador.
Okay. My name's Scott Willis. I'm with Zinware. We're a technology, global technology company, specifically in the wireless space, and very much like my colleagues, we're very focused in the in-building space, and specifically around IoT. How do we and smart cities? How do we enable that connectivity layer? Right. I mean, I think the important the important thing that at least from our perspective that we believe is all of these hundreds of millions of connected devices that ultimately all of us collectively, if I could use that term broadly, are projecting for the industry. The important layer there is the connectivity layer, right? To be able to connect all the data devices to do any type of data analysis and pull it all together, and then create that call to action or the monetization stage of that data. It requires that robust connectivity layer that can support all of those devices in a very efficient and robust way. So that's where we sit, and we're certainly excited about IoT and the opportunity it presents for all of us as an industry.
Great. So let me get started with a quick question. In terms of connectivity, so in building connectivity, what kind of, especially with all these different new technologies that are coming out with, whether it's 5G or even with, small cells, what do you guys see as the biggest challenges for building owners, building managers, in terms of, connectivity and connecting different devices?
Sure. I think at a high level is that there's no one size fits all, and there's going to be different requirements, and depends on the use case from that perspective, and depends also on the building itself. It's green field or brown field from that perspective, and what you actually try to accomplish from that perspective. So I think that becomes the biggest challenge from that perspective, and build the system that fits your needs from that perspective, and be able to integrate the different connectivity, I believe, into one place that you can have control over it, and configuration management for the building from that perspective.
Yeah, I'll build upon that. Yesterday I had the pleasure of moderating a panel between CTS and JMA Wireless, and we dove into specifically that question and that issue. I think what's apparent is that the challenges are many, and this is really the decade for the consulting integration business, because there is no one size fits all. There is no one common protocol. There is no one common platform that just sort of connects everything together. Jim and I were talking before the panel, and sometimes it actually starts with electricity. You got to go and rewire the building, to make sure you got the right amount of electricity. And if everything you're doing is running over PoE, guess what? The PoE budget is only so big, and now you got to do multiple, frankly, deployments of Ethernet, and sometimes coaxial fiber, and all of everything else combined. So it always takes you back to the business case. How much can you do with how much you want to spend in order to automate the business or automate the building?
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys are right on in terms of comments. I mean, I think the point I would amplify the most in that is just the level of complexity to the point you said. We're looking backwards. We're in an environment where at the cellular layer, right, most enterprises have been comfortable with relying on the operator, right? It's where the expertise sits. They rely on the operator to bring the connectivity, and that's the way it worked. Obviously, if you look at the enterprise over the last few years, there's been a lot of knowledge and a lot of deployment at the Wi-Fi layer. But when you look forward, I agree with your comment. There is no one network or one layer that's going to support all of IoT. And so if you're the enterprise and you're looking to figure out how do I enable IoT in my environment, just the level of complexity, knowledge, experience to make the right decision in that is what we're finding a very difficult barrier to overcome. And somehow, breaking that down and bringing simplicity and bringing a model to the market that will enable that enterprise, I think is going to play a long ways in really unleashing that capacity.
Okay, actually, follow up to that one. 5G. I think the conversations around 5G have centered around better in-building connectivity, possibly use of millimeter or some other technologies to provide that last mile connectivity into buildings and homes. Do you guys see that some of the challenges that with connectivity that you just talked about, do you see 5G being the technology that would help alleviate some of those challenges, or is it going to just add further burden?
So I've been I'll hand it over to Intel afterwards here, but I've been very public on 5G. I personally look at that as more of a framework. We want things to work together because 5G, if you look at it sort of in its truest sense of release 15 and 16 to come, and the years that it takes to actually go and implement that, 5G is going to be very, very small in very small areas, and maybe in buildings or in stadiums and so forth, just based on the speed and connectivity that it promises. It's not going to have that true sort of mobile connectivity and the gig speed, everywhere you go, like you have now with LTE and what you used to have with 3G. But it's a framework for how things will work together, which means you're going to actually have 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G have to work together. So you're going to have the...
It's evolutionary.
Yeah, 28 gigahertz spectrum all the way down into 450. But you're not going to have that gig experience all throughout. So connecting, if anything, it just puts more pressure on buildings to having the best capacity, the best in-building coverage that you could possibly have. And that means a lot of retrofitting, and it means, forget about the old buildings, because it's already tough enough to work in the old buildings. You got to look at just new buildings.
I agree that 5G is a framework, but also, it requires a framework to have basically heterogeneous networks to work together. But they're coming up with certain technology that I think will help. Network slicing, for a start, and network slicing actually can start with 4G, and you don't have to wait for 5G. So some of the concepts that they're talking about actually can provide the differentiation in service that you inside the network and the better utilization of your resources inside the network. So I think that it will help in that case. And in some cases, fixed wireless using 5G also could help connect some of the buildings from that perspective. But yes, I don't really think 5G will solve all the issues. And I look at it as a framework that will add, basically potentially solutions to some of the issues today and will help make things work in, hopefully more homogeneous way going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much in that same line of thinking. 5G in one sense is I think collectively for all of us should be exciting because that is the topic that's out there that is enabling and driving all of us at conferences like this, right? It's driving a lot of discussion, but going back to my previous comment, 5G is also is adding another layer of complexity. So again, it's not. It's like, it's not any different than any other technology, right? It's not going to be a snapshot in time and all of a sudden 5G is widely deployed. It is going I agree, it's building by building, it's city by city, it's venue by venue, and it's just, it's going to take time and it's going to be an evolution to where ultimately, where we all kind of envision what everybody talks about, which is, ultimately realizing the value of what 5G is gonna ultimately bring. It is going to be a journey between here and there that adds complexity. So again, in many cases it's great because it's enabling all of the things that we're talking about that all of us desire. But on the downside, it just adds another layer of complexity on how do we get there. Yeah.
Okay, so now a question about retrofitting versus new buildings. Just in the US alone, I'm going to, estimate that about 95% of the buildings are retrofits. And, a smaller number would be new construction, since the construction market in the US is still a little slow in terms of recovery. How do you guys actually see, I think over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of, talk about moving into getting away from the old standards of BACnet and LawnWorks and moving into more IP-based connectivity and IP-based technologies. How do you guys see a lot of this playing out in the future? Because, a lot of it, with it being retrofitting, and I think, Ronny, you mentioned the power problems we're going to have because of, retrofitting these buildings. What else do you guys see as big problems in terms of moving away from where we've been over the last 30, 40 years to where we really want to go over the next 10 or 15?
Yeah, I guess a stock tip for everyone in the audience here. I mean, anything that has to do with integration, cabling, CommScope, tower companies, good investments. Fiber companies, fantastic investments. Anyone who's made cables, fantastic investment. So, personally, I believe that it's going to be building by building, enterprise by enterprise. And, by that I mean it's going to be big real estate companies that say, we have 10 to 15 or 200 properties. We want to have a competitive advantage. We want to retrofit or upgrade everything in order to attract the right tenants and charge more and call it smart buildings or a smart campus for that matter. And then there's going to be, whether it's a company like IBM or Cisco, just want to claim that we are using IoT, we have smart buildings. They will do their own retrofits, and that's kind of how it's going to start. And I think pretty much 90% of that business is going to be outsourced to consulting integration services. That's going to do very well in that in that market.
I think it's going to go back also to the business case from that perspective. And I think one of the challenges of the IoT is try to build the business case. And, so if there is a good use for retrofitting, and then, as I said, it's going to be case by case. How do you retrofit? Do you use how much wireless, how much wireline? What speed? Do you use license, unlicensed, and all that? That's all adds to the complexity. But the bottom line is that there's a good use case for it and there's a good ROI. And that is some of the challenges that I still see in the IoT space, to be honest with you.
Okay. Jim?
Well, I think the bigger issue with building owners is they have an IT department, but they also have a lot of facility management people, facility engineers. Those folks are dealing with mechanical systems, electrical, and so forth, and may not have the skills to deal with some of the technology and the connectivity.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, Jim and I actually had this conversation earlier. I mean, there's a scarcity of IT resources out there. You know, the teams that's going to be taking this to the next level, whether it's building by building or enterprise by enterprise, or in the case of these big real estate companies, they have to actually acquire new talents in or decide we want to outsource all of our buildings to an IT serving company or an MSP to take care of this for us, because it is a whole new ballgame when you get into, you know, every device, every sensor, anything in a building being connected over an IP address.
If I could, one of the issues with the building industry is there's not people coming in to get jobs for mechanical engineers, any facility engineers. It doesn't really attract a lot of young folks. So we don't have enough people. It's a global thing. So I think some of this is, some of the facility management is going to be eventually done by machines.
Actually, on that note, quick question. Is it the lack of talent or the lack of interest from the talent to work in the industry?
I think it's the lack of, you know, being a facility engineer may not be something.
It's not a sexy job. It's not really something that typically people would think to do.
Everyone wants to be a software engineer now. You know, no one wants to touch any physical things. You know, who's going to make that elevator work when it stops? You know,
Yeah, but look, I do want to emphasize that point because I want to agree. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I talked earlier about the need to enable that connectivity layer, right? That has to get solved before IoT can be realized in any significant way. And they were making the point earlier. I mean, we're digging into this deep, right? We're out talking to real estate developers. We're out talking to architects. We're out there talking to property management companies. We're out there talking to direct enterprise. And this is a little bit of what, as an industry, we're facing in terms of how do we solve this problem, because the decisions and the drivers for a large enterprise who is in a campus environment and has some IT expertise and has some knowledge and is going to be there for an extended period of time, you know, what drives their decisions, how they make their decisions, what choices they make is very different than if you go into a enterprise building that may be, you know, 15 stories high, and you've got 6 different enterprises in there, and the termination of their lease, you know, varies across multiple periods of time, and how they make decisions and who pays for it, right? And how disruptive are you going to be in my environment? All of those are everyday real challenges as we really ultimately deal with this retrofit issue that you talked about. So you can't resonate more with the comment that you made. It is going to be a building by building process as you really look to build out and create that connectivity that we're looking to do. It is a complex formula that we're trying to solve for.
So I think we just have about 5 minutes left in the session. 10? Okay. So it's a good time to jump into, you know, if each one of you can give me what's a smart building going to look like in the next 5 years? Or how are people going to really, you know, when they see a smart building, how is it going to be different from anything else that they've seen?
I'll I'll kick it off and see if we can say something that's controversial. But we have to be realistic about what we can do in 5 years. I mean, there's the slide where we want to be way out there, and IoT is going to change the world and everything else. But then there's the reality, as I think we have pointed out. I would just even like to just try to mirror the experience that I have when I walk into my house right now. And maybe it's because I've worked in wireless for such a long time. Anything that's new, I try to make it work at home to see, how does that impact and how can we translate this into the enterprise. So whether that's monitoring on security cameras or the presence when myself or my kids enter into the building, being able to turn it on and off irrigation and automate that to make that more effective, make water use more effective, make the AC more effective and heating. These are all the same issues that you would have in the enterprise when it comes to sort of secure access, maintaining or operating the building or the home, and other things to do with utilities to make it more cost efficient. And I think we start with that basics and try to replicate that experience. So, we pretty much have all of that at home now, but that's 12 different apps, and there's no common protocol. There's me being the IT guy and trying to make it all work together. But I think that's where we have to start in the enterprise as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I would echo that. I think the way I would describe it, if you're looking at a 5-year horizon, I couldn't agree more 100%. I mean, to accomplish a significant amount of 5 years is going to be a lot. But I think if you look at, you commented on new building or new construction. I think if you look at what's going into new buildings today in terms of how they're designing, how they're configuring, how the architects are looking at those, all around efficiency, all around, fiber, all around a lot of the various applications that we all envision as we look into a building, I think that's a model of where we need to try to probably target the retrofitting process of a lot of the existing buildings today, if you kind of look at a 5-year window. So, again, when you're talking about real estate, you're talking about assets that don't change very much. They don't change very often, right? They're there for many, many years, in many cases decades. And so those things move very, very slowly when you talk about the type and size of retrofitting that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I think at a high level in 5 years, if you can really get connectivity inside the buildings and in my mind also good automation for many of the functions that you need for the building, like just even talk about basics, like I go to the building and some office is too hot and the other office is too cold. And the ability to adjust, I mean, like your desk at home, like if you can have that even within the buildings, like if there's people there and temperature can go like up or down, depends on that case, and learn from that perspective and automate some of these things. That would be awesome to have. Plus, as Ron mentioned, like that, an easy way to secure right now, I just have a badge, I have to go into the building. If there's a much easier way, is either through a fingerprint or what have you to secure.
Voice controls.
Sorry?
Voice controls.
Or voice controls and what have you. It's correct. Just make things a little bit easier from that perspective. I think that's what I would, look for in 5 years, best case.
Okay.
I mean, to a point that the question that was, or the mention that was made here earlier, is that it starts with one business case, one problem that you solve. I mean, taking something as simple as the number of mobile devices in a building or in a room directly is tied to the HVAC or to Nest, and it senses and controls the heat accordingly. I mean, that's a simple thing to do. Now, trying to do that across HVAC, across the world, different platforms and so forth, it becomes just more difficult, which means it's, again, back to building by building. But maybe Jim can give us a checklist to all vendors of what he needs in order to enable a smart building. It would surely help.
I have that.
Now he tells us.
The building industry traditionally has been very ineffective, wasted a lot of stuff. I think for the building industry to move into AI and start doing machine learning is going to take a while, 5 years, 10 years. But eventually, because of maybe loss of some skill sets for people that don't want to be facility engineers, the machine's going to operate the building. The other quick thing that is happening is some of those buildings are going away. When people go out and buy something, or at least my wife does, she goes to Amazon and she doesn't go to the mall. So a lot of those malls are just not effective as well.
They're becoming data centers.
Yes.
Well, on that note, I'm kind of depressed about that, but also happy because I'm not a huge fan of malls. But I want to open it up if anyone has any questions, anything you guys want to address with the panelists today. So
Getting the first one's always the toughest, and once you get the reference case, then everybody else can move along. Any of you have a reference of a building that, boy, was really hot and didn't really have any energy conservation, et cetera, and they modified it and became really good? That's a showcase to hold up. Anyone have an example of that today? Because in 5 years, that's what we're going to need. Lots of examples.
The one company, facility that is running on machine learning is Google. But, I mean, they have all the technology skills and so forth. But that's not going to happen with traditional facility employees.
But with due respect, sir, I don't think you'll use that you couldn't use that as a reference case because you'll never get what the energy was before, what the energy was reduced to later on, or any of those things.
Yeah.
Is there something that is published that you can say, hey, before they started doing this IoT stuff, here's where they were on energy, on comfort, on security, on whatever. And after they did this, here's where they are. Here's the difference. Anywhere?
The analytics done in building industry has been done through fault detection and diagnostics. That's created value in mechanical systems. But that's fairly small compared to something like machine learning.
I'm only aware of test cases, and where the test case is owned by a mobile operator or mobile operators. It was done in the UK over 2 years ago. Some of it was actually done along with mobile edge computing in combination with Intel. Small cell company plus Intel doing mobile edge computing and security, but also tracking of personnel in the building and actually integration with the HVAC system. But again, I'm not aware of, as you're requesting, public references of what the actual savings were, but what we saw was up towards 30%, in some cases more.
That's what I'm saying. None of us doubt the direction. None of us even question that it's going to go there. But when you start talking about 5 years, there's going to be at least one leader of the pack, somebody we can all say, that person did so-and-so thing, and here's the results. And the fact that none one anywhere can talk about that today.
no, and that's
I'll give you 2 examples, and they're personal examples. By me automating the home electrical usage and the HVAC, meaning the using 2 nests, we have reduced our electrical bill on a monthly basis by close to 44%.
But that's next.
I know, but I mean, that's just one specific use case. But at the same time, there's also the electrical usage of having all the lighting outside, being timed, and at the same time being on a different system. Those are just 2 simple examples, but those are the examples that we need to bring into the enterprise.
Sorry, not to argue this at any point, sir, but 20 years ago at Motorola, you left the conference room, the lights would go out. That was 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's savings.
Yeah, I'm not counting that as IoT.
No, it's not. It's when you bring.
On the outside, turn on and turn off. Not counting that as IoT either.
Like,
Putting a nest in, I'm not counting as IoT either. So IoT, the way I'm looking at it is, the way everyone's explaining it to me is it's a control device and an application. There's a whole bunch of stuff that connects one to the other, and it's not here today.
It's not. I mean, there's the way we define IoT, honestly, I would say you have a lot of separate systems. a lot of those separate systems need to start coming together for it to be something that makes sense, something that's actually going to drive value. Look at an enterprise today. You have fleet management systems, you have HVAC systems, security, all of these things, they all operate in their own silos. Until we start bringing all of them together, have one common management, one user interface to actually manage everything in an enterprise, we're not there yet.
Yeah. I mean, one simple way of looking at IoT as a definition, at least the way I look at it, is if I can access it via my phone or a laptop, you know, it has an IP address and I can control it or change it. To me, that's a connected device. We are in a loose defined area right now.
It's evolving.
Yeah.
We're talking about large buildings, corporate buildings and all, and as you're mentioning that there are facility managers, technicians and that. So this particular solution for this large enterprises where they're getting 200, 300 facilities, how is this going to be a solution that can really save in terms of ROI, in the money they're spending versus already existing employees there who's managing their show in different silos?
I'm not sure what the.
No,
I'm not sure what the question is.
actually, if you wouldn't mind, I think we're out of time, but let's take this conversation outside, finish it off. But
how is this IoT for people who manage offices, basically? This solution implemented there, the ROI we're going to bring in for the retrofits and all those stuff we're talking about. Versus the manual people who are managing the show, the technicians or the facility managers. Is this really a ROI for them implementing this?
so what would be the ROI for the people that are actually managing systems today if we start implementing IoT? And like you said, if the machine's going to control everything, where's the ROI for the people?
It's one of the issues.
I mean, that's the problem. It's automation's going to take over a lot of the things that are done manually today, and there's no getting around that part. So, well, I'm sorry.
AI kill jobs.
Automation does, yeah, in general. But, well, thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the session.